When Nolan Pierce walked into the Clearwater Grand Hotel that night, he had no idea he was about to spend the most dangerous 12 hours of his life locked in a room with a woman accused of stealing $43 million. The storm outside was tearing Portland apart, trees down, power lines snapping, streets flooding like rivers. But the real storm was waiting inside that executive suite on the ninth floor, where a corporate executive with 8 hours left to prove her innocence would drag a quiet forensic accountant into a conspiracy that reached higher than either of them imagined. If you want to see how far this chaos goes, stay until the end and hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The rain hit so hard it sounded like gravel on the windshield. Nolan Pierce gripped the steering wheel tighter, leaning forward to peer through the wash of water his wipers couldn't clear fast enough. Visibility was maybe 10 feet. The streets of downtown Portland were already flooding, water lapping over curbs and pooling in intersections. His daughter Mia's voice crackled through the Bluetooth speaker, thin and worried. "Dad, are you okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart," Nolan said, forcing calm into his voice. "Just a lot of rain. I'll be at the hotel in 5 minutes." "The news says it's the worst storm in like 20 years. Then it's a good thing I'm not driving home tonight." He signaled and turned onto Morrison Street, where the traffic lights swayed violently on their cables. "You're all set at Grandma's, right?" "Yeah, she made pot roast." "Lucky you." Nolan smiled despite the tension in his shoulders. "I'll call you before bed, okay? And I'll be home tomorrow afternoon." "Okay. Love you." "Love you too, Mia." The call ended just as he pulled into the covered valet area of the Clearwater Grand Hotel. Water poured off the awning in sheets. A young valet in a soaked uniform hurried over, looking miserable. Nolan grabbed his overnight bag from the passenger seat and stepped out into the humid, roaring night. The noise was incredible, wind screaming through the downtown canyon, rain hammering everything, the distant wail of emergency sirens. He handed the valet his keys and jogged toward the revolving doors. Inside the hotel lobby was chaos. People were everywhere, clustered around the front desk, slumped in chairs with luggage at their feet, pacing near the windows with phones pressed to their ears. The marble floors were slick with tracked-in water. A family with two small kids sat on a bench near the elevators, the mother looking exhausted, the father arguing quietly with someone on his phone. The whole place smelled like wet wool and stress. Nolan made his way to the desk, weaving through the crowd. There were 3 clerks working, all of them moving fast, all of them wearing the strained smiles of people who'd been dealing with angry customers for hours. He waited his turn, listening to the woman ahead of him demand an upgrade she clearly wasn't going to get. When he finally stepped up, the clerk, a young guy with dark circles under his eyes, gave him a tired nod. "Welcome to the Clearwater Grand. Checking in?" "Yeah, reservation under Pierce, Nolan Pierce." The clerk typed, frowned, typed some more. His frown deepened. "Okay, so we do have you in the system. Prepaid, 1 night, king bed." "Right. But we're overbooked." The clerk winced. "Like, really overbooked. Half the city's stranded here because of the storm. I've got people sleeping in the conference rooms." Nolan's stomach sank. "So you're saying, I'm saying we don't have a room for you. I booked 3 weeks ago." "I know. I'm sorry." The clerk looked genuinely miserable. "We've been calling people all day trying to sort this out, but the storm hit faster than anyone expected. We're doing everything we can." Nolan rubbed his face. He'd come to Portland for a deposition tomorrow morning, a fraud case involving a mid-sized tech firm. He couldn't afford to miss it, and with the roads the way they were, driving back to Beaverton tonight wasn't an option. "What are my options?" "Honestly, not great. Every hotel downtown is slammed. You could try the airport, but I heard they're closed because of flooding on the runways." "Great. Look, let me check something." The clerk typed rapidly, his eyes scanning the screen. "Okay, so there is 1 room left, executive suite on the 9th floor, but it's already occupied." "Then it's not available." "Well," the clerk hesitated. "The guest offered to share. She's in the same situation you are. Storm refugee. She said if we're desperate, she's okay with someone else using the 2nd bedroom." Nolan blinked. "Someone I don't know?" "Yeah. That's insane." "I know, but she was really clear about it. She said she doesn't care as long as they're not, quote, a creep or a conspiracy theorist." The clerk shrugged. "Her words." Nolan looked around the lobby. The crowd had only gotten bigger. Someone was yelling near the elevators. A baby was crying. Outside, lightning flashed, and thunder rolled so loud he felt it in his chest. He turned back to the clerk. "What's the suite like?" "2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, shared living area. Top floor. Nice view, if the rain ever stops." Nolan considered. He was tired. He had a 7 a.m. wake-up call, and he really didn't want to sleep on a conference room floor. "She's okay with this?" She suggested it. "All right, fine." Nolan pulled out his wallet. "What's the damage?" "Already paid. You're splitting the cost of the suite 50-50. The clerk handed him a key card. "9th floor, room 914. And hey, good luck." "Yeah, thanks." Nolan grabbed his bag and headed for the elevators, feeling like he'd just agreed to something he was going to regret. The 9th floor was quieter, calmer. The carpet up here was thick and patterned, the lighting soft and expensive looking. Nolan found room 914 at the end of the hall and stood outside for a moment, listening to the muffled roar of the storm through the walls. Then he knocked. Footsteps. The door swung open. The woman standing there was maybe 35, tall and sharp-featured, with dark hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She wore a white blouse with the sleeves rolled up and black slacks, no shoes. Her eyes were red-rimmed, like she'd been crying or hadn't slept in days. Possibly both. She looked him up and down with the kind of quick, assessing gaze that told Nolan she was used to reading people fast. "You're the guy from downstairs," she said. Not a question. "Nolan Pierce. Adrian Vale." She stepped aside. "Come in. Try not to judge the mess." Nolan stepped into the suite, and his first thought was that it was way nicer than anything he usually stayed in. The living area had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, though right now all he could see was rain streaking the glass and the blurred glow of Portland's lights through the storm. There was a couch, a coffee table covered in papers, a kitchenette, a flat-screen TV playing muted news footage of flooded streets. Adrian shut the door and locked it. "Your room's on the left, mine's on the right. Bathrooms are attached. We've got a shared mini-fridge, coffee maker, the usual." "Got it." She crossed her arms, leaning against the wall. She looked exhausted. "So, conspiracy theorist or creep?" "Forensic accountant." "Huh." Adrian's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "That's either really boring or really dangerous. Depends on the case." "Fair enough." She glanced at the papers spread across the coffee table, then back at him. "Look, I'll stay out of your way. I've got work to do tonight, so I'll probably be up late. If I'm too loud, just knock on the wall or something." "You're fine." Adrian nodded, but she didn't move. She was studying him again, and Nolan got the distinct impression she was trying to decide whether to say something. "What?" he asked. "Nothing, just—" She hesitated. "You seem normal. That's good. I wasn't sure what I was going to get." "Same." She laughed, short and humorless. "Yeah. Well, welcome to the worst night of my life." She turned and walked back toward the coffee table, picking up a folder. "Make yourself at home." Nolan watched her for a moment, then carried his bag into the left bedroom and shut the door. The room was clean and simple. King bed, desk, chair, window with a view of the storm. Nolan dropped his bag on the bed and sat down, pulling out his phone. He called Mia. She answered on the second ring. "Dad?" "Hey, kiddo. I'm at the hotel. Safe and sound." "Is it nice?" "It's fine. Fancy, actually. I'm sharing a suite with someone." "A stranger?" "Yeah, the hotel overbooked, but it's fine. She's nice." "She?" Mia's voice took on a teasing edge. "Is she pretty?" "Mia. I'm just asking." Nolan smiled despite himself. "Go do your homework." "I already did. Grandma's making me watch Jeopardy with her." "Sounds riveting." "It's torture." "Okay, I gotta go. Love you." "Love you too." He hung up and sat there for a while listening to the rain. Then he got up, changed into sweatpants and a t-shirt, and brushed his teeth. By the time he came out of the bedroom, it was almost 9 o'clock. Adrienne was still at the coffee table, sitting on the floor with her back against the couch, papers and folders spread around her like a crime scene. She had a laptop open, a pen between her teeth, and a glass of wine on the table. She looked up when he walked in. There's coffee if you want it, she said around the pen. I'm good, thanks. Nolan headed for the kitchenette, poured himself a glass of water, and tried not to look too obviously at the papers. But he was a forensic accountant. Looking at financial documents was literally his job. And from where he stood, he could see spreadsheets, bank statements, highlighted sections, handwritten notes in the margins. Adrienne noticed. She pulled the pen out of her mouth. You're staring. Sorry. It's fine. She set the pen down and leaned back, rubbing her eyes. You might as well know. I'm probably getting fired tomorrow. Nolan paused. What? Fired. Escorted out. Maybe arrested, depending on how the board meeting goes. She said it flatly, like she was talking about the weather. There's a fraud investigation at my company. $43 million missing, and they think I did it. Nolan set his water down. Did you? Adrienne looked at him, her expression unreadable. Then she laughed, sharp and bitter. No, but thanks for asking. Sorry, occupational hazard. Yeah, well, she gestured at the papers. I've got until 7 a.m. to prove I didn't steal the money, so I'm having a great night. Nolan walked over and sat down in the chair near the couch, looking at the spread of documents. What kind of fraud? Vendor payments. Fake invoices, shell companies, all routed through my division over the last 18 months. Payments were approved under my authority, so the board thinks I'm either the mastermind or catastrophically incompetent. She picked up her wine glass and took a long drink. Either way, I'm done. Who found it? Internal audit. They flagged it 2 weeks ago. The board's been investigating quietly, and tomorrow morning they're bringing it to a vote. If I can't prove my innocence, I'm out. I'm probably facing charges. Nolan frowned. You said the payments were approved under your authority. Did you approve them? Some of them, yeah. But I didn't know they were fake. The invoices looked legitimate. The vendors were in our system. Everything checked out. Until it didn't. Right. Adrienne set the glass down hard. Look, I know how this sounds, but I didn't do this. I've been set up. Nolan leaned forward, studying the spreadsheets. You have any idea who did? If I did, I wouldn't be sitting here drowning in paperwork. She sighed. The problem is the fraud's been going on for years, long before I took over the division, but the audit only caught the last 18 months, which is exactly when I got promoted. So it looks like I came in, saw an opportunity, and went for it. Convenient. Exactly. Adrienne looked at him, and for the first time there was something raw in her expression. I need help. I've been staring at these numbers for 2 days, and I can't find the pattern. I can't figure out who did this or how. And if I walk into that meeting tomorrow with nothing, I'm finished. Nolan didn't say anything for a moment. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows. He thought about his daughter, about the quiet life he'd built after his wife died, about the cases he took that paid the bills and didn't drag him into other people's disasters. Then he looked at Adrienne, this stranger who'd offered to share her hotel room with someone she didn't know, who was sitting on the floor of a suite she probably couldn't afford anymore, trying to save her career with a pen and a stack of paper. Can I see the files? He asked. Adrienne blinked. What? The files, the invoices, the payment records, the vendor list. Can I look at them? You're offering to help? I'm offering to look. No promises. She stared at him for a long moment, like she was trying to figure out if this was real. Then she grabbed the nearest folder and handed it to him. Knock yourself out. Oof. It took Nolan about 10 minutes to see the first red flag. He sat on the floor across from Adrienne, spreading out the invoices in chronological order. The payments were small, none over $50,000, but they were frequent. Twice a month, sometimes more. Always to different vendors, always approved through the same procurement system. These vendor codes, Nolan said, tapping one of the invoices. They're sequential. Adrienne looked up from her laptop. What? The vendor ID numbers, look. He lined up 3 invoices side by side. V4472, V4473, V4474. They were created one right after the other. So legitimate vendors don't usually get registered in perfect sequence unless someone's batching them together. And look at the dates, he pointed. All 3 were added to the system on the same day, March 16th, 2 years ago. Adrienne leaned over, frowning. I didn't register those. I wasn't even in this division yet. Who was? My predecessor, guy named Rick Howell. He retired about 6 months before I got promoted. Nolan made a note. What happened to him? Nothing. He's in Florida now, as far as I know. Bought a condo on the beach. On a corporate salary? Adrienne paused. I don't know. I never thought about it. Nolan pulled up the vendor details on her laptop, scanning the addresses listed for the three companies. These are all registered to the same building, a co-working space in Seattle. That's not unusual. Lots of small vendors use shared offices. Sure, but look at the payment amounts. He grabbed a calculator and started adding. V4472 received $240,000 over 18 months. V4473 received $230. V4474 received $210. They're all just under the threshold that would trigger an external audit. Adrienne went still. Someone knew the limits. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. Nolan sat back, his mind racing. This isn't sloppy. It's deliberate. Whoever set this up knew the system inside and out. But why pin it on me? Because you're the new boss. You don't know the history. You trust the people under you. And when the audit hits, you're the one holding the bag. He looked at her. You said Rick Howell retired. Did anyone replace him in a senior role? Yeah, my VP of operations. Name's Ethan Carr. He's been with the company for 12 years. He would have worked under Howell. Yeah. Nolan tapped the edge of the folder. I think you need to look at Ethan Carr. Adrienne's face went pale. Ethan's one of the people pushing hardest for my head tomorrow. He's been the board's main source on the investigation. Of course he has. Nolan stood, pacing now. If he was part of this, he'd want you gone before you had a chance to dig. And if the board fires you, the investigation stops. Case closed. But I don't have proof, just a theory. Then we find proof. Adrienne stared at him. You're serious? Yeah. Why? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Nolan thought about that. He thought about Mia, about the years he'd spent keeping his head down and his life small because big risks had cost him everything once before. But he also thought about sitting in that chair, watching this woman try to fight a battle she couldn't win alone, and walking away because it wasn't his problem. I don't like people getting screwed, he said finally. And I'm good at finding money trails. So let me help. Adrienne's throat worked. She nodded, once. Okay. Nolan grabbed his laptop from the bedroom. Let's start with Ethan Carr's financial history. If he's dirty, he made a mistake somewhere. We just have to find it. They worked through the night. Adrienne pulled up every file she had access to. Vendor contracts, payment authorizations, email chains, personnel records. Nolan built spreadsheets, cross-referenced vendor addresses, tracked payment patterns, flagged anomalies. The storm raged outside, the city below disappearing under water and wind. But inside the suite, the only sound was the click of keyboards and the rustle of paper. Around midnight, Adrienne got up to make coffee. Nolan rubbed his eyes, staring at the screen until the numbers blurred. He'd found 6 more suspicious vendors, all registered within a 3-month window, all tied to the same Seattle co-working space. The payments added up to just over $12 million. This is bigger than I thought, he said when Adrienne came back with 2 mugs. How big? 12 million in fake vendor payments, maybe more. And that's just what I can confirm so far. He took the coffee gratefully. Whoever did this has been at it for years. Adrienne sat down hard. Jesus. Yeah. She was quiet for a moment, staring at the papers. If Ethan's behind this, he didn't do it alone. $12 million doesn't move without someone in finance signing off. And someone in IT would have had to set up the vendor accounts. You have access to personnel files? Limited. But I can see who was working in those departments during the relevant time periods. Pull them. Adrienne turned back to her laptop, her fingers flying. Nolan watched her, noticing for the first time how tightly she was holding herself together. Her hands were steady, but her jaw was clenched, and there was a tightness around her eyes that spoke of exhaustion and fear she wasn't letting herself feel yet. Got it, she said. Finance and IT staff from 2 years ago. Nolan moved to sit beside her, scanning the list of names. Most of them he didn't recognize, but one stood out. Who's Laura Wynn? Controller. She reports directly to the CFO. She's been signing off on payments to these vendors for 2 years. Adrienne's face went ashen. Laura's the one who testified to the board that I approved all the payments. Of course she did. Nolan highlighted her name. If she's part of this, she'd want to make sure the investigation stopped with you. But Laura's... Adrian stopped. She's always been professional. I've never had a problem with her. That doesn't mean she's clean. Nolan pulled up another spreadsheet, this one tracking Laura Wynn's approval signatures. Look at this. Every single one of these fake invoices has her signature on the final authorization. She's the common thread. Adrienne pressed her hands to her face. This is insane. This is fraud, and it goes higher than you thought. She looked at him, her eyes wet. Even if you're right, how do I prove it? I can't exactly walk into the board meeting and accuse my VP and my controller of running a $12 million scam without evidence. Then we get evidence. Nolan stood, grabbing his phone. You said the board meeting is at 7 a.m.? Yeah, that gives us 6 hours. He checked the time. It was almost 1 in the morning. We need to trace the money. If Ethan and Laura are stealing, they're moving it somewhere. Offshore accounts, shell companies, something. If we can find where it's going, we've got them. Adrienne stood too, wiping her eyes. How do we do that? We follow the vendors, find out who owns them, where they're registered, where the money goes after it leaves your company. He met her gaze. And we do it fast. Adrienne took a shaky breath. Then she nodded. Okay, let's do it. By 3 a.m., they had names. Nolan traced the ownership records of the fake vendors through public databases, corporate filings, and a few creative searches that skirted the edges of what was strictly legal. Most of the companies were registered to a law firm in Delaware, a common setup for shell corporations. But 2 of them listed individual owners. One was a man named Marcus Lind. The other was Laura Wynn. There, Nolan said, pointing at the screen. Laura's listed as the owner of V4478. And look at the filing date. 3 months after she joined your company. Adrienne stared at the screen, her face pale. She set up a fake company and paid herself. Yeah, and Marcus Lind, Nolan pulled up another file. He's listed as a consultant in your IT department. He's been there for 5 years. So we've got IT and finance both involved, at minimum. Nolan leaned back, running a hand through his hair. We need to find Ethan's connection. He's the one running the division. If Laura and Marcus are moving the money, Ethan's the one approving the workflow. Adrienne grabbed her laptop, pulling up Ethan's personnel file. She scrolled through his employment history, his financial disclosures, his... She stopped. What? Nolan asked. Ethan listed a business interest last year, a consulting firm. She clicked the link. It's called Cascade Solutions. Nolan's pulse quickened. He pulled up the vendor list and searched for Cascade Solutions. It was there. Payments totaling $8 million over 2 years. Got him, Nolan said quietly. Adrienne sat back, her hands shaking. Ethan's been paying himself through his own company, and using Laura to sign off on it, Marcus to create the vendors, and you to take the fall when it all came apart. Nolan looked at her. You were never supposed to survive this. Adrienne's voice was tight. What do I do? You walk into that meeting with this. He gestured at the files. You show them the vendor registrations, the ownership records, the payment trails. You show them Ethan's company, Laura's name on the filings, Marcus's role in IT. You bury them. And if they don't believe me, they'll believe the numbers. Numbers don't lie. Nolan stood, gathering the files into a single folder. But you need to be ready, because when you walk in there and accuse your VP of stealing $8 million, he's going to fight back. Hard. Adrienne stood too, her jaw set. Let him try. By 5 a.m., the storm had started to ease. The rain was still falling, but the wind had died down, and the worst of the lightning had moved east. Nolan stood at the window, watching the gray light of dawn creep across the flooded city, his mind still racing through the case. Behind him, Adrienne was printing documents, organizing them into a presentation folder, rehearsing her opening statement under her breath. She'd changed into a fresh blouse and blazer, her hair pulled back, her face composed. She looked like someone ready to go to war. Nolan turned. You ready? No. Adrienne looked up, her eyes tired but clear. But I'm going anyway. He walked over, handing her the final spreadsheet. This is the timeline. It shows every payment, every vendor, every signature. If they ask you a question, the answer's in here. Thank you. Adrienne took the folder, then looked at him for a long moment. Why did you do this? Really? Nolan thought about it. because it was the right thing to do. That's it? Yeah. Adrienne smiled, faint and genuine. You're a better person than most people I know. I doubt that. I don't. She held out her hand. Whatever happens in that meeting, thank you for believing me, for helping me, for... Her voice cracked slightly. For not walking away. Nolan shook her hand. Her grip was firm, steady. Good luck. I'll need it. She grabbed her bag, checked her phone, and headed for the door. Then she paused, looking back at him. If this works, if I'm still employed by tonight, I owe you dinner. You don't owe me anything. I know, but I want to. She smiled. Deal? Nolan smiled back. Deal. Adrienne left. Nolan stood there for a moment, listening to the sound of her heels fading down the hallway. Then he turned back to the window, watching the storm clouds break apart over the city, and hoped like hell she made it through. Nolan didn't go back to bed. He stood at the window for another 20 minutes, watching the sky turn from black to bruised purple to pale gray. The storm had passed, but the city below looked like it had been through a war. Streets were rivers, trees were down, emergency lights flashed on every corner. He thought about Adrienne walking into that boardroom, about the folder in her hands and the people waiting to tear her apart, and he felt something twist in his chest that he hadn't felt in a long time. Worry. For someone who wasn't his daughter. He shook it off and went to take a shower. By the time he got out, dried off, and dressed in his suit for the deposition. It was 6:15. He made coffee in the kitchenette, drank it black, and tried not to think about what was happening 8 blocks away at Adrienne's office. It wasn't his problem anymore. He'd done what he could. The rest was up to her. His phone buzzed, a text from his lawyer. Deposition postponed. Flooding closed the courthouse. Rescheduled for next week. Nolan stared at the message. Then he set the phone down and laughed, short and bitter. Of course. He'd spent the night tearing apart a fraud case for a stranger, and now he had nowhere to be. He poured another cup of coffee and sat down on the couch, surrounded by the scattered remains of last night's work. Papers everywhere, spreadsheets, highlighted invoices, the evidence that might save Adrienne's life or might not be enough. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Mia. A video call. He answered, and her face filled the screen, messy hair, still in pajamas, grinning. Dad, did you see the storm? It's crazy outside. I saw it. You okay? Yeah, Grandma won't let me go outside. She says there's power lines down everywhere. Mia leaned closer to the camera. When are you coming home? This afternoon. My meeting got canceled. So you're just sitting in a hotel? Pretty much. Boring. She paused, squinting at him. You look tired. I didn't sleep much. Why not? Nolan hesitated. I was helping someone. The woman you're sharing the suite with? Yeah. Mia's eyes lit up. What's she like? She's in trouble. Work trouble. I helped her figure some things out. Is she nice? Yeah, she is. Good. Mia grinned. You should help people more. You're good at it. Nolan felt something warm and uncomfortable settle in his chest. Thanks, kiddo. Okay, Grandma's making pancakes. Love you? Love you too. The call ended. Nolan sat there for a moment, staring at the blank screen, thinking about his daughter's words. You should help people more. As if it were that simple. As if stepping into someone else's disaster didn't cost something every single time. But it had cost something last night, and he'd paid it anyway. He was still sitting there when his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. Hello? Nolan? Adrienne's voice tight and breathless. It's me. What happened? I need you to come here. Now. His pulse kicked up. What's going on? The meeting, it's not over. They believe me about Ethan and Laura, but the board's lawyer is here and he's asking questions I can't answer. About the money trail, about the offshore accounts, about... She broke off, her voice cracking. I need someone who can explain the forensics, someone who can back up what I'm saying. Please. Nolan was already on his feet, grabbing his jacket. Where are you? Cascade Tower, 15th floor, the executive boardroom. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Thank you. She hung up. Nolan shoved his phone in his pocket, grabbed the folder of evidence, and ran. The streets were a mess. Water everywhere. Debris in the intersections, traffic lights out. Nolan drove through it all, his hands tight on the wheel, his mind racing. The board believed her. That was good. But if they were asking questions she couldn't answer, it meant they were still deciding, still weighing whether to fire her or investigate further. And if Nolan couldn't sell them on the forensics, Adrian was still finished. He parked in a loading zone outside Cascade Tower and jogged through the flooded plaza to the entrance. The lobby was empty except for a security guard who barely looked up as Nolan signed in and headed for the elevators. 15th floor. The doors opened onto a quiet hallway lined with expensive art and frosted glass. Nolan found the boardroom at the end, double doors, closed, voices murmuring inside. He knocked. The voices stopped. Footsteps. The door opened and Adrienne stood there, her face pale but composed. "You came." "Yeah. Thank you." She stepped aside and Nolan walked into the room. It was a long, sleek space with a table that could have seated 20 people. Right now there were 8. 5 board members. 3 men, 2 women, all in suits that cost more than Nolan's car. A lawyer in a gray tie holding a legal pad. Ethan Carr, sitting at the far end of the table, his face a mask of controlled rage. And Adrienne standing near the head of the table with her folder open in front of her. The oldest board member, a man with silver hair and sharp eyes, looked at Nolan. "And you are?" "Nolan Pierce, forensic accountant." He set his folder on the table. "Ms. Vale asked me to review the evidence last night. I can walk you through the financial analysis if you need it." The lawyer leaned forward. "You're not affiliated with this company?" "No." "Then why are you here?" "Because she asked me to be." Nolan met his gaze evenly. "And because the numbers don't lie." The lawyer's mouth thinned, but he didn't argue. The silver-haired board member gestured to an empty chair. "Sit. Explain." Nolan sat. Adrienne sat beside him, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Across the table, Ethan Carr stared at him with cold, calculating fury. Nolan opened his folder and started talking. "Sit." He walked them through it step by step. The fake vendors, the sequential registration codes, the Delaware law firm, the payments just under the audit threshold, Laura Wynn's name on the filings, Marcus Lind in IT, and finally, Cascade Solutions, Ethan Carr's own company, siphoning $8 million out of the division he was supposed to be running. The board members listened in silence. The lawyer took notes. Ethan didn't move, didn't speak, but Nolan could see the tension in his jaw, the white-knuckle grip on the armrest of his chair. When Nolan finished, the silver-haired man looked at Ethan. "Do you have a response to this?" Ethan's voice was smooth, controlled. "It's a fantasy. Mr. Pierce has taken a series of coincidences and built a conspiracy theory around them." "Yes, I own Cascade Solutions. It's a legitimate consulting firm that provides services to multiple clients, including this company. Yes, Laura Wynn signed off on payments. That's her job as controller. And yes, some of those vendors are registered in Delaware, so are half the companies in America." "Then explain the money," Nolan said quietly. Ethan looked at him. "Excuse me?" $8 million went to Cascade Solutions over 2 years. If it's a legitimate consulting firm, you should have contracts, invoices, deliverables. Where's the work? "We provided strategic consulting on operational efficiency." "Show me the reports." Ethan's expression didn't change. "They're proprietary. Convenient." Nolan leaned forward. "You registered 3 of the fake vendors on the same day Laura Wynn joined the finance department. You approved payments to those vendors within a week, and when the audit flagged the fraud, you were the first person to point the finger at Ms. Vale. That's not a coincidence. That's a setup." "That's slander," Ethan said coldly. "It's forensic accounting." Nolan pulled out another spreadsheet. "And here's the part that really kills your story. The payments to Cascade Solutions stopped 3 months ago, right when the internal audit started. If your company was providing real services, why did the work suddenly end?" Ethan said nothing. The silver-haired board member looked at the lawyer. "Can we freeze his accounts?" "I'll file the motion this afternoon," the lawyer said. Ethan stood abruptly. "You're making a mistake." "Sit down, Ethan," one of the women said sharply. "You're letting her manipulate you." Ethan pointed at Adrienne. "She's desperate. She brought in some outside consultant to spin a story because she knows she's guilty. And you're falling for it." Adrienne's voice cut through the room like a blade. "I didn't steal anything, but you did." Ethan's face went red. "You have no proof." "I have your company. I have Laura's name on the filings. I have Marcus Lynn's access log showing he created those vendor accounts. Adrienne stood, her hands flat on the table. And I have every payment you authorized, every signature you forged, every lie you told to cover your tracks. So don't stand there and call me a liar when you're the one who's been stealing from this company for 2 years. The room went silent. Ethan stared at her, his chest rising and falling, his fists clenched. Then he turned and walked out. The door slammed behind him. The silver-haired board member sighed. Well, that went poorly. He's gonna run, the lawyer said. Then call security and get the police on the phone. The man looked at Adrienne. Ms. Vale, you're suspended pending a full investigation, but given what we've heard this morning, I think it's safe to say you're no longer the primary suspect. Adrienne's shoulders sagged. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We still have to untangle this mess. He looked at Nolan. Mr. Pierce, I assume you'll be available to assist with the investigation? If you need me. We will. The man stood, gathering his papers. Let's reconvene in 2 hours. I want a full forensic audit started today. The board members filed out, followed by the lawyer. Adrienne stayed where she was, staring at the table, her hands shaking. Nolan stood and walked over to her. You okay? I don't know. Her voice was small. I just accused my VP of stealing $8 million in front of the board. You did more than that. You proved it. Did I? She looked up at him, her eyes wet. He's going to fight this. He's going to hire lawyers, tie this up in court for years. And even if I'm cleared, my career is still... Adrienne, Nolan put a hand on her shoulder. You won. They believe you. That's what matters. She laughed, shaky and broken. I don't feel like I won. You will. He squeezed her shoulder gently. Give it time. Adrienne wiped her eyes, took a breath, and nodded. Okay. Okay. She grabbed her folder, her hands still trembling. I need to call my lawyer, and I need to... She stopped, looking at him. You don't have to stay. You've done enough. I know, but I'll stay, Nolan said, until you don't need me. Adrienne's throat worked. Then she smiled, fragile but real. Thank you. Bolts. They didn't leave the building. Adrienne spent the next 2 hours on the phone with her lawyer, with HR, with the board's investigator. Nolan sat in a conference room down the hall, going through the files again, building a more detailed timeline for the forensic auditors who were already on their way. Around noon, Adrienne came to find him. She looked exhausted, her blazer off, her hair falling out of its clip, dark circles under her eyes. But she was smiling. They arrested Laura, she said. Nolan looked up. When? 20 minutes ago. She was at her desk deleting files. Security caught her before she could finish. Adrienne sat down across from him, her smile widening. And Ethan's gone. He didn't show up for the second board meeting. His car's not in the parking garage. The board's lawyer thinks he's running. He won't get far, not if they froze his accounts. They did. And they issued a warrant. Adrienne leaned back, closing her eyes. It's really happening. They're really going down. Yeah, they are. She opened her eyes, looking at him. I couldn't have done this without you. You would have figured it out. No, I wouldn't have. Her voice was firm. I was drowning, Nolan. I had 8 hours and a stack of papers I couldn't make sense of. You walked in and saw what I couldn't. You found the pattern. You built the case. You saved my life. Nolan shifted uncomfortably. I just did what I'm good at. You did more than that. Adrienne reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. You believed me. When everyone else thought I was guilty, you looked at the numbers and saw the truth. That's not nothing. Nolan looked down at their hands. Hers was smaller, softer, but her grip was strong. I'm glad I could help. Me too. She pulled her hand back, her smile turning wry. So, about that dinner I promised you. You don't have to. I want to. And honestly, I could use a drink and a meal that isn't hotel room service. She stood, grabbing her blazer. You free tonight? Nolan thought about Mia, about the drive back to Beaverton, about the quiet house waiting for him. Then he thought about Adrienne, standing in a hotel suite at midnight, asking for help because she had no one else to turn to. Yeah, he said. I'm free. Good. Adrienne grinned. Pick me up at 7? I don't know where you live. I'll text you the address. She headed for the door, then paused. And Nolan, thank you for everything. He nodded. See you at 7. Buonasera. Nolan left the office around 2 and drove back to the hotel to check out. The suite was exactly as they'd left it. Papers scattered, coffee mugs on the table, the ghost of the long night still hanging in the air. He packed his bag, checked the room one last time, and headed downstairs. The clerk at the front desk was different from last night, a young woman with a bright smile. Checking out, Mr. Pierce? Yeah. I hope you enjoyed your stay. Nolan thought about that, about the storm, the flooded streets, the stranger who'd become something more than a stranger in the space of 12 hours. It was interesting. Well, we hope to see you again. She handed him his receipt. Drive safe. He took the receipt and walked out into the gray afternoon. The city was still waterlogged, still cleaning up, but the rain had stopped and the sky was beginning to clear. Nolan drove home slowly, navigating around fallen branches and detour signs, his mind already turning over the case. Ethan was running. Laura was in custody, but there was still Marcus Lynn, still the Delaware law firm, still the offshore accounts Adrienne had mentioned in the board meeting. The case wasn't over. It was just beginning, and Nolan had a feeling he was going to be part of it for a while. He got home a little after 3. Mia was in the living room, sprawled on the couch with her homework, and she jumped up when he walked in. Dad! Hey, kiddo. He dropped his bag and caught her in a hug. Miss me? You were only gone one night. I know. Mia pulled back, studying him. You look different. Different how? I don't know. Less tired, maybe? She grinned. Did you have fun with the lady from the hotel? Nolan laughed. I wouldn't call it fun, but yeah, it was good. Are you going to see her again? Actually, yeah, we're having dinner tonight. Mia's eyes went wide. Like a date? Like a thank you dinner. She wants to buy me a meal because I helped her out. Uh-huh. Mia's grin turned sly. Sure, Dad. Whatever you say. Nolan shook his head, smiling despite himself. Go finish your homework. Fine, but I want details later. He went upstairs, showered, changed into clean clothes, and lay down on his bed, intending to rest for 20 minutes. He woke up 2 hours later to his phone buzzing on the nightstand. A text from Adrienne. Still on for tonight? I'm at 482 River Heights Drive. See you at 7. Nolan checked the time. 6:30. He swore, rolled out of bed, and hurried to get ready. River Heights Drive was in a wealthy neighborhood on the west side of town. Big houses, manicured lawns, the kind of place where people had landscapers and home security systems. Nolan pulled up to number 482 at 7 on the dot and parked in the driveway. The house was modern and sleek, all glass and sharp angles with a view of the hills. Adrienne opened the door before he could knock, and Nolan barely recognized her. She changed out of the work clothes into jeans and a soft gray sweater, her hair down and loose around her shoulders. She looked younger, less guarded, and when she smiled at him, it reached her eyes. Hey, she said. Hey, come in. I'm almost ready. Nolan stepped inside. The house was beautiful. Open floor plan, high ceilings, expensive furniture that looked like it came from a catalog. But it also felt empty. No clutter, no personal touches, no sign that anyone actually lived here. Adrienne caught him looking. I know, it's a little sterile. I bought it 2 years ago and never really decorated. She grabbed her coat from a hook by the door. Work kind of ate my life. I get that. Yeah? She looked at him curious. You married? Kids? One daughter, Mia. She's 12. And her mom? She died 6 years ago. Adrienne's face softened. I'm sorry. It's okay. We're doing all right. Nolan hesitated. What about you? Single. No kids. No time for either. She smiled, but there was something sad in it. My life's been work for so long, I don't think I know how to do anything else. Maybe that'll change. Maybe. She grabbed her purse. Come on. I know a place downtown that makes the best pasta you've ever had. The restaurant was small and tucked into a side street, the kind of place locals knew about but tourists never found. The hostess greeted Adrienne by name and led them to a corner table with soft lighting and a view of the street. They ordered wine and food, and for the first time since they'd met, they didn't talk about fraud or vendors or boardrooms. They talked about normal things. Adrienne told him about growing up in Seattle, about her first job out of college, about the years she'd spent climbing the corporate ladder. Nolan told her about Mia, about his wife's death, about the quiet life he'd built in the aftermath. "You're a good dad," Adrienne said at one point, swirling her wine. "I try." "No, I mean it. You could have walked away from me last night, but you didn't. Because you don't walk away from people who need help. That's who you are." She met his eyes. "Mia's lucky." Nolan felt heat rise in his face. "Thanks. I'm serious. Adrienne leaned forward. "I've spent my whole career around people who only care about themselves, about money, power, status. But you helped a stranger because it was the right thing to do. That's rare. You would have done the same. I don't know if I would have." She looked down at her glass. "I think I've been so focused on surviving in that world, I forgot what it's like to just be decent." "You're decent. You shared your hotel room with a stranger." Adrienne laughed. "I was desperate." "Still counts." They ate in comfortable silence for a while, and Nolan realized he was enjoying himself. Really enjoying himself. It had been a long time since he'd had dinner with a woman who wasn't his daughter or his late wife's mother. A long time since he'd let someone see past the careful walls he'd built. And Adrienne was easy to talk to, sharp and funny and honest in a way that felt refreshing after years of polite small talk with people who didn't really care. When the check came, Adrienne grabbed it before Nolan could. "I said I was buying," she said firmly. "I know, but no buts. You saved my career. The least I can do is buy you dinner." Nolan relented. "Fine. But next time I'm paying." Adrienne's smile turned mischievous. "Next time, if there is one, I'd like that." She paid the bill and stood. "Come on. Let me drive you back to your car." They walked out into the cool night air, the streets still damp from the storm, but calm now, peaceful. Adrienne's car was parked a block away, a sleek sedan that probably cost more than Nolan made in a year. She unlocked it and slid into the driver's seat. Nolan got in the passenger side. "Where's my car?" "Still at the hotel, right?" "Yeah. I'll take you there." She started the engine and pulled out onto the street. They drove in silence for a few blocks, the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement. Then Adrienne's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and frowned. "It's the board's lawyer." She answered on speaker. "This is Adrienne." "Ms. Vale, I'm sorry to call so late, but we have a development." The lawyer's voice was tight. "Ethan Carr turned himself in an hour ago." Adrienne's hands tightened on the wheel. "What?" He walked into a police station with his attorney and confessed to the fraud. Full confession. Names, dates, amounts. He's cooperating. Why would he do that? Because the FBI is involved now. They traced the offshore accounts this afternoon and found connections to a money laundering operation out of the Cayman Islands. If Ethan cooperates, he gets a reduced sentence. If he doesn't, he's looking at 20 years. Adrienne pulled over to the curb, her face pale. "The FBI? They're expanding the investigation. They want to interview you tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. at their field office." "Am I a suspect?" "No, but they need your testimony, and they want access to all the files Mr. Pierce compiled." Adrienne looked at Nolan. "Can they do that?" Nolan leaned toward the phone. "This is Nolan Pierce. Yes, they can, and they should. If this is tied to money laundering, it's bigger than corporate fraud." "Agreed," the lawyer said. "Miss Vale, I'll send you the details. Be prepared for a long day tomorrow." "Okay, thank you." Adrienne hung up and sat there staring at the dashboard. Nolan watched her. "You okay?" "I don't know." She laughed, shaky. "The FBI, money laundering, this just keeps getting bigger." "Yeah, it does." "And you?" She turned to him. "They want your files, which means you're going to be dragged into this too." "I'm already in it." "But you didn't sign up for the FBI." "Neither did you." Nolan met her eyes. "Look, if you need help tomorrow, I'll be there, just like I was this morning." Adrienne's expression crumpled. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you need help. And because I'm not walking away until this is over." She reached across the console and grabbed his hand. "I don't deserve you." "You don't need to deserve it. You just need to let me help." Adrienne squeezed his hand, her eyes wet. Then she nodded. "Okay." She pulled back onto the road and drove him to the hotel. When they got there, she parked next to his car and turned to him. "Tomorrow," she said, "9 a.m. FBI field office. You'll be there?" "I'll be there." "Thank you." She smiled, fragile but real. "For everything." Nolan got out of the car, then leaned down to look at her through the open door. "Get some sleep. You're going to need it." "You too." He watched her drive away, her taillights disappearing into the night. Then he got in his own car and started the long drive home, his mind already turning over the case, the FBI, the money laundering operation that had just turned Adrian's corporate fraud into something far more dangerous. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice whispered that he was in too deep now, that this wasn't just helping a stranger anymore, that he cared about what happened to her in a way that went beyond professional courtesy. But Nolan pushed the thought away and focused on the road ahead. Because tomorrow, the real fight was going to begin. Nolan got home a little after 10 and found Mia asleep on the couch, her math homework still spread across the coffee table. He covered her with a blanket, turned off the TV, and went upstairs to his office. Sleep wasn't an option, not with the FBI interview looming in less than 11 hours. He pulled out his laptop and started organizing every piece of evidence he'd compiled: vendor registrations, payment timelines, ownership records, the connections between Ethan, Laura, and Marcus. If the FBI was looking at money laundering, they'd need more than corporate fraud paperwork. They'd need to see the whole network, the flow of money from the fake vendors to the offshore accounts and beyond. Nolan worked until 2 in the morning, building spreadsheets and cross-referencing financial data he'd pulled from public records. When he finally closed the laptop, his eyes burned and his head throbbed, but he had something solid, something the FBI could use. He set his alarm for 6 and collapsed into bed. The alarm felt like it went off 2 minutes later. Nolan dragged himself up, showered, dressed in his best suit, and went downstairs to make coffee. Mia wandered into the kitchen around 6:30, still in her pajamas, yawning. "You're up early," she said. "Got a meeting." "With the lady?" Nolan poured coffee into a travel mug. "Yeah, her situation got more complicated." "How complicated?" "FBI complicated." Mia's eyes widened. "Whoa, is she in trouble?" No. But the people who tried to frame her are." Nolan grabbed his keys. "I'll be back this afternoon. Grandma's picking you up from school, okay?" "Okay." Mia hesitated. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "Be careful." Nolan smiled. "Always am." He kissed the top of her head and left. The FBI field office was a nondescript building in northeast Portland, all concrete and tinted windows, with a parking lot full of government sedans. Nolan pulled in at 8:40 and sat in his car for a few minutes, going over his notes one last time. His phone buzzed. A text from Adrienne. "I'm in the lobby." Terrified, Nolan texted back, "Be there in 2 minutes." He grabbed his folder and headed inside. The lobby was sterile and quiet, with hard chairs and a receptionist behind bulletproof glass. Adrienne sat near the window, her hands folded in her lap, wearing a navy suit that made her look both professional and fragile. When she saw Nolan, relief flooded her face. "You came," she said, standing. "I said I would." "I know, but—" She stopped, shaking her head. "I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about what they're going to ask, what I'm supposed to say. I don't know how to do this. Just tell the truth, that's all they want. And if the truth isn't enough, it will be." Nolan handed her the folder. "I organized everything. Timelines, vendor records, payment trails. If they ask you a question, the answer's in here." Adrienne took the folder, her hands trembling slightly. "Thank you." "Ms. Vale?" A woman in a dark suit appeared from a hallway, holding a badge. "I'm Special Agent Rachel Kwan. We're ready for you." Adrienne glanced at Nolan. "Go," he said quietly. "You've got this." She nodded and followed the agent down the hall. Nolan sat down in one of the hard chairs and waited. 40 minutes later, another agent came out. A man in his 50s with graying hair and the kind of face that had seen too many bad things. He looked at Nolan. "Mr. Pierce?" "Yeah." "I'm Special Agent Michael Torres. Come with me." Nolan followed him down a long corridor and into a small conference room. Torres gestured to a chair. Have a seat. Nolan sat. Torres closed the door and sat across from him, pulling out a legal pad. Thanks for coming in. I know this isn't how you plan to spend your morning. It's fine. Ms. Vale speaks very highly of you, says you cracked the case wide open. I just followed the numbers. Well, those numbers led us to something a lot bigger than corporate fraud. Torres flipped open a file. Ethan Carr, Laura Wynn, and Marcus Lind have been running a money laundering operation for at least 3 years. The fake vendor payments you identified were just the front end. The money was moving through shell companies in the Caymans, then into real estate investments, cryptocurrency, offshore holdings. We're talking about $43 million, maybe more. Nolan's stomach tightened. Who else is involved? That's what we're trying to figure out. Torres pulled out a photograph and slid it across the table. Recognize this man? Nolan looked at the photo. It showed a man in his 60s, silver hair, sharp suit, standing in front of a corporate logo. He looked familiar, but Nolan couldn't place him. No, he said. Who is he? His name is Victor Hale. He's the CFO of Adrian Vale's company. Nolan went still. The CFO. Yeah, we think he's the one running the whole operation. Ethan, Laura, and Marcus were the soldiers. Victor was the general. Torres leaned forward. We found a series of encrypted emails between Victor and Ethan discussing the vendor setup, the payment schedules, the offshore accounts. Victor's been orchestrating this from the top, using his position to authorize the payments and keep the auditors off the trail. Does Adrienne know? We just told her. Torres's expression softened. She didn't take it well. Nolan stood abruptly. I need to see her. Mr. Pierce. She's been set up by the second most powerful person in her company. She needs to know someone's on her side. Torres studied him for a moment, then nodded. Room 3, down the hall, on the left. Nolan didn't wait for more. He walked out and found room 3, knocked once, and opened the door. Adrienne was sitting at a table with Agent Kwan, her face pale and streaked with tears. When she saw Nolan, something broke in her expression. He was there the whole time, she said, her voice cracking. Victor signed off on my promotion. He told me I was doing a great job, and the whole time he was using me. Nolan sat down beside her. I know. I trusted him. I thought... She stopped, pressing her hands to her face. I'm so stupid. You're not stupid. You were doing your job. He's the one who betrayed you. Agent Kwan cleared her throat. Ms. Vale, we're going to need your help building the case against Victor Hale. We have the emails, the financial records, but we need someone who can testify to the internal workings of the company, someone who can explain how he manipulated the system. Adrienne lowered her hands. You want me to testify? Yes. Against the CFO of my company? Yes. Adrienne laughed, hollow and bitter. If I do that, I'll never work in corporate finance again. No one will hire someone who testified against their own leadership. Maybe, Kwan said, but if you don't, Victor Hale walks. And the next time he does this, someone else gets framed. Adrienne looked at Nolan. What do you think? I think you already know what you're going to do. She stared at him for a long moment. Then she turned to Kwan. What do you need from me? They spent the next 3 hours going over the case. Kwan and Torres walked Adrienne through the timeline, asking her to identify emails, meetings, decisions that Victor had been part of. Nolan sat beside her, pulling up records when she needed them, cross-referencing dates and payments, filling in the gaps in her memory. It was exhausting. Adrienne's voice grew hoarse. Her hands shook every time she had to look at another email from Victor, another piece of evidence that the man she'd trusted had been using her as a scapegoat from the beginning. But she didn't stop. She answered every question, clarified every detail, and by the time they finished, Kwan was smiling. This is good, the agent said. Really good. With your testimony and the financial records, we've got enough to arrest Victor Hale today. Adrienne's eyes widened. Today? We've been waiting for corroboration. You just gave it to us. Kwan stood. Sit tight. I'll be back in a few minutes. She left. Torres followed, leaving Nolan and Adrienne alone in the conference room. Adrienne slumped in her chair, her face gray with exhaustion. I can't believe this is happening. You did the right thing. Did I? Because right now it feels like I just destroyed my career to help the FBI arrest my boss. You destroyed a criminal operation. There's a difference. Adrienne looked at him, her eyes red. What happens now? They arrest Victor, probably Ethan, Laura, and Marcus too, if they haven't already. The case goes to trial, you testify, and eventually, it's over. And then what? I go back to work like nothing happened? Pretend I didn't just blow up my entire company? Nolan hesitated. I don't know, but you'll figure it out. Will I? Her voice broke. Because right now, I feel like I've lost everything. My job, my reputation, my... She stopped, shaking her head. Sorry, I'm being dramatic. You're being human. Nolan reached over and covered her hand with his. And for what it's worth, I think you're one of the bravest people I've ever met. Adrienne looked down at their hands, her throat working. I don't feel brave. You don't have to feel it for it to be true. She laughed softly, wiping her eyes. You're too nice, you know that? I've been told. The door opened. Quan stepped in, her expression grim. We've got a problem. Adrienne sat up. What? Victor Hale's gone. His assistant says he left the office 2 hours ago and hasn't come back. His phone's off, his car's not at his house, and his bank accounts show a cash withdrawal of $50,000 this morning. Nolan's pulse kicked up. He's running. Looks like it. Quan crossed her arms. We've issued a warrant and alerted TSA, but if he's smart, he's already out of the state. Adrienne's face went white. So he gets away? Not if we find him first. Quan looked at Nolan. You said you traced the offshore accounts, right? The ones the money was flowing into. Yeah, most of them were in the Caymans. Do you have the account numbers? I have the routing information. Why? Because if Victor's running, he's going to need money. And if he accesses those accounts, we can track him. Quan pulled out her phone. Can you send me everything you have? Right now? Right now. Nolan grabbed his laptop and started pulling up files. Within 10 minutes, he'd sent Quan a complete breakdown of the offshore accounts, including routing numbers, transfer dates, and linked entities. Quan scanned the data, her fingers flying over her phone. Then she looked up. Got him. Where? Adrienne asked. One of the accounts just had a transfer request. $10 million moved to a bank in Costa Rica. Quan's smile was sharp. He's not running domestic. He's going international. Torres appeared in the doorway. Airport? Has to be. PDX is the closest. Quan grabbed her jacket. Let's move. Adrienne stood. Can I come? No, Quan said firmly. This is an active pursuit. You stay here. But, Ms. Vale, you've done enough. Let us handle this. Quan and Torres left, their footsteps echoing down the hall. Adrienne stood there, her fists clenched, her whole body vibrating with frustration. I hate this, she said. I hate sitting here while they chase him. I want to see his face when they arrest him. I want him to know I'm the reason he got caught. You will, Nolan said. Just not today. Adrienne turned to him. What if they don't catch him? They will. But what if they don't? What if he gets on a plane and disappears? What if I went through all of this for nothing? Then we keep going. Nolan met her eyes. We find another way. But we don't stop until he's caught. Okay? Adrienne stared at him, her breath shaky. Then she nodded. Okay. They waited. 1 hour. Then 2. Adrienne paced the conference room, checking her phone every 30 seconds. Nolan sat at the table, going over the files again, looking for anything they might have missed. At 1:30, Quan called. Adrienne answered on speaker. Did you get him? We got him. Quan's voice was tight with satisfaction. He was at PDX trying to board a flight to Panama City. Torres spotted him at the gate. He ran, but airport security tackled him before he made it to the jetway. Adrienne's knees buckled. She grabbed the edge of the table, her eyes filling with tears. You're sure? I'm sure. Victor Hale is in custody. It's over. Adrienne pressed a hand to her mouth, her shoulders shaking. Nolan stood and put a hand on her back, steadying her. Thank you, Adrienne said into the phone, her voice breaking. Thank you so much. Thank Mr. Pierce, Quan said. His account data is what led us to him. We'll be back at the office in an hour. Sit tight. The call ended. Adrienne turned to Nolan, her face wet, her expression somewhere between relief and disbelief. He's caught, she whispered. Yeah, he is. It's really over. Yeah. Adrienne threw her arms around him, burying her face in his shoulder. Nolan froze for a second, then wrapped his arms around her, holding her as she cried. Deep, shuddering sobs that sounded like they'd been building for days. I'm sorry, she said against his shirt. I'm sorry, You don't have to apologize. I feel like I've been falling for 3 days straight, and this is the first time I've hit the ground. Then take a minute. You've earned it. She clung to him for a long time, and Nolan let her, his hand moving in slow circles on her back. When she finally pulled away, her face was blotchy and her eyes were swollen, but she was smiling. Thank you, she said, for everything. You already thanked me. I know, but I'm going to keep doing it until it feels like enough. Nolan smiled. Okay. Quan and Torres returned an hour later with news that Victor Hale was being held without bail, that Ethan Carr was cooperating fully, and that Laura Wynn and Marcus Lind were already facing federal charges. The case was airtight. The investigation would continue for months, but the core conspirators were caught. Adrienne's part was done. She signed a final statement, shook hands with the agents, and walked out of the FBI building into the cool afternoon air. Nolan followed, carrying his laptop bag, feeling the weight of the last 3 days settle into his bones. Adrienne stopped on the sidewalk and turned to face him. What now? Now you go home. Get some sleep. Let yourself process all of this. And you? I go home to my daughter. Make sure she knows I'm alive. Adrienne smiled, soft and sad. She's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her. They stood there for a moment, the afternoon sun breaking through the clouds for the first time in days. Adrienne looked like she wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. Finally, she stepped forward and hugged him again, quick and tight. I'll call you, she said. Okay. She pulled away and headed for her car. Nolan watched her go, then climbed into his own car and started the drive home. Mia was waiting for him when he walked in the door, practically vibrating with curiosity. So? She demanded. What happened? Did the FBI arrest people? Is the lady okay? Nolan dropped his bag and sat down on the couch, exhausted. Yeah, they arrested 4 people. The lady's fine. The case is closed. 4 people? Dad, that's insane. It was a big case. Mia sat beside him, studying his face. Are you okay? Yeah, just tired. You did a good thing, right? Nolan looked at his daughter, 12 years old, too smart for her own good, already seeing the world in shades of right and wrong that he'd spent years learning to navigate. Yeah, I think so. Then you should be proud. I am. He ruffled her hair. Thanks, kiddo. You're welcome. Mia grinned. So when are you seeing her again? I don't know. Maybe never. Dad, come on. You've spent like 3 days with this woman. You're totally going to see her again. Nolan didn't answer, because the truth was, he didn't know. Adrienne's life was corporate boardrooms and high-stakes decisions, and a world that didn't have room for a single father who worked from home and coached Little League. And his life was small and quiet and built around keeping Mia safe. Those 2 worlds didn't overlap, except they had. For 3 days they'd collided in the middle of a storm, and something had happened that Nolan couldn't quite name. Something that felt like the beginning of something he wasn't ready for. His phone buzzed. A text from Adrienne. Thank you. For everything. I mean it. Nolan stared at the message for a long time. Then he typed back. Anytime. He hit send and set the phone down, wondering if he meant it. 3 days passed. Nolan went back to his normal routine. Client calls, forensic reports, school pickups, dinner with Mia. He didn't hear from Adrienne, and he told himself that was fine. She had her life. He had his. The case was over. But on the 4th day, she called. Nolan answered on the 2nd ring. Hey. Hey. Adrienne's voice sounded lighter, less raw. How are you? Good. You? Better. I've been sleeping a lot, eating actual food. It's weird. Nolan smiled. Sounds healthy. Yeah, listen. I wanted to tell you something. The board met yesterday. And? They offered me Victor's job. Nolan sat up. CFO? Yeah, interim at first. But if I want it permanently, it's mine. That's incredible. I know. Adrian paused. I turned it down. Nolan blinked. What? Why? Because I don't want to be CFO. I don't want to spend the rest of my life fighting battles like this one. I want... She stopped, her voice catching. I want something different, something that doesn't cost me everything. What does that look like? I don't know yet, but I'm going to figure it out. She laughed softly. I've got some time. The board gave me 6 months paid leave to recover. So I'm thinking I'll travel, take a break. Maybe figure out who I am when I'm not working 80 hours a week. That sounds good? Yeah, it does. She hesitated. Nolan? Yeah? I know you've got your life and I've got mine. And I know we barely know each other, but I'd like to see you again, if you're open to it. Nolan's chest tightened. Yeah, I'd like that. Really? Really? Adrian's relief was audible. Okay, good, because I was kind of terrified you were going to say no. Why would I say no? Because you're smart and stable and you've got a kid to think about. And I'm a mess. You're not a mess. You're someone who just survived something terrible and came out the other side. Nolan leaned back, staring at the ceiling. And I'd be an idiot to say no. Adrian laughed, and it sounded like sunlight. Okay, so, dinner? When? Tonight? I've got Mia tonight. Bring her. Nolan paused. You sure? Yeah, I'd like to meet her, if that's okay with you. Nolan thought about his daughter, about the careful boundaries he'd built to protect her, about the risk of letting someone new into their lives. Then he thought about Adrian standing in a hotel suite in the middle of a storm, asking for help because she had no one else. Okay, he said. Dinner? 7 o'clock? Perfect. I'll text you the address. See you then. He hung up, and for the first time in days, he felt something that wasn't exhaustion or worry or fear. He felt hope. Mia did not make it easy. Wait, so you want me to have dinner with a stranger? She asked, looking up from her phone with the kind of skepticism only a 12-year-old could muster. Nolan was in the kitchen, trying to decide if his blue shirt was too casual or if the gray one made him look like he was going to a funeral. She's not a stranger. I've told you about her. You told me she's the lady from the hotel who got framed for stealing $43 million. That's not exactly a normal introduction, Dad. She didn't steal anything. That's the whole point. I know, but still. Mia set her phone down, watching him with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. You're nervous. I'm not nervous. You've changed shirts 3 times. Nolan looked down at the blue shirt he'd just put on. I'm trying to look presentable. For her or for the FBI? Mia. She grinned. I'm just saying, you like her. Nolan sighed and sat down at the kitchen table. Yeah, I do. Is that a problem? Mia's grin faded into something more thoughtful. She was quiet for a moment, picking at the edge of her phone case. Is she nice? Yeah, she is. And she knows about Mom? Yeah. What did she say? Nolan thought back to that conversation in the restaurant, the way Adrian's face had softened when he mentioned his wife's death. She said she was sorry, and then we talked about other things. Good. Mia nodded, like she'd made a decision. Okay, I'll go to dinner, but if she's weird, I'm texting Grandma to come get me. Deal. And Dad? Mia looked at him seriously. Don't be nervous, you're a catch. Nolan laughed despite himself. Where did you learn that? TV. She stood and grabbed her jacket. Come on, let's go meet your girlfriend. She's not my... Nolan stopped. There was no point. Fine, let's go. Adrian had chosen a family-style Italian place on the east side, the kind of restaurant with checkered tablecloths and breadsticks in a basket. Nolan pulled into the parking lot at 7 on the dot, his palms sweating slightly on the steering wheel. Mia was staring out the window at the restaurant. This place looks normal. What were you expecting? I don't know, something fancier. She's like a corporate executive, right? She was. She's taking a break now. Why? Because she almost went to jail for something she didn't do, and that kind of thing changes your perspective. Mia absorbed this. Okay, fair. They got out of the car and walked inside. The restaurant was warm and busy, families crowded around tables, kids running between booths. Nolan scanned the room and spotted Adrian sitting in a corner booth near the window. She looked different again. No suit, no work clothes, just jeans and a soft green sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked younger, more relaxed, and when she saw Nolan, her whole face lit up. Then her eyes shifted to Mia, and her smile turned a little nervous. Nolan walked over with Mia at his side. Hey. Hey. Adrian stood, wiping her palms on her jeans. You must be Mia. Mia looked her up and down, taking her time. Yeah, you're Adrienne. I am. Adrienne offered her hand. It's really nice to meet you. Mia shook it, her grip firm. Dad says you almost went to jail. Adrienne blinked. Then she laughed, surprised and genuine. Yeah, I did, but your dad made sure that didn't happen. Good. He's really smart. I noticed. Mia nodded, apparently satisfied, and slid into the booth. Nolan sat beside her and Adrienne sat across from them, her hands folded on the table. So, Adrienne said, looking at Mia, your dad tells me you're in 7th grade. Yeah. How's that going? It's fine. School's boring, but whatever. I remember that feeling. Really? Mia tilted her head. You seem like you'd be good at school. I was, but I still thought it was boring. Adrienne smiled. What's your favorite subject? Science. We're doing a unit on genetics right now. That's cool. What are you learning? And just like that, they were talking. Mia, who could be shy around new people, opened up about her science project, about her friends, about the book she was reading. Adrienne listened like she actually cared, asking follow-up questions, laughing in the right places, never talking down to her. Nolan sat back and watched, feeling something tight in his chest loosen. When the food came, Mia dove into her spaghetti and kept talking. So Dad said you're not working right now. That's right. I'm taking some time off. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. Maybe travel, maybe figure out what I actually want to do with my life. Mia frowned. You don't know? Not really. I've been so focused on work for so long, I forgot to think about what makes me happy. That's sad. Adrienne laughed. Yeah, it kind of is. Well, my dad's really good at helping people figure stuff out. He could probably help you. Adrienne glanced at Nolan, her eyes warm. He already has. Mia grinned. See? I told you he's a catch. Nolan's face went hot. Mia. What? It's true. Mia turned back to Adrienne. Did he tell you he coaches my soccer team? He didn't. Yeah, he's terrible at it, but he tries really hard, so it's kind of cute. I'm sitting right here, Nolan said. Adrienne was laughing now, and Mia looked pleased with herself. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of conversation and laughter, and by the time they finished dessert, Nolan realized he'd been smiling for an hour straight. When they walked out to the parking lot, Mia hung back with Adrienne while Nolan unlocked the car. So, Mia said quietly, are you going to keep hanging out with my dad? Adrienne looked surprised. I'd like to, if that's okay with you. It's okay with me, but you should know he's kind of a worrier. He's going to overthink everything and probably try to protect you from stuff you don't need protecting from. Adrienne smiled. I'll keep that in mind. And also, he hasn't dated anyone since my mom died, so if he's weird about it, that's why. Mia, Nolan started, but Adrienne held up a hand. It's okay. She looked at Mia seriously. Thank you for telling me. I'll be patient with him. Mia nodded. Good. Then she climbed into the car, leaving Nolan and Adrienne standing in the parking lot under the streetlights. Adrienne turned to him, her expression soft. Your daughter's amazing. She's something. No, I mean it. She's smart and funny and protective of you. You've done a really good job with her. Nolan felt his throat tighten. Thanks. And for what it's worth, I had a really good time tonight. Yeah, me too. They stood there for a moment, the night air cool around them. Adrienne stepped closer, and for a second Nolan thought she might kiss him, but instead she just squeezed his hand. I'll call you, she said. Okay. She walked to her car, and Nolan got into his, where Mia was already buckled in and grinning. She's cool, Mia said. Yeah, she is. Are you going to see her again? I think so. Good. Mia leaned back in her seat, looking out the window. You should be happy, Dad. You deserve it. Nolan didn't know what to say to that. So he just drove home, his daughter's words echoing in his head. Ahmet. Over the next 2 weeks, Nolan saw Adrienne 4 more times. Coffee on a Saturday morning while Mia was at a friend's house. Lunch downtown on a weekday when Adrienne had a follow-up meeting with the FBI. A walk through the park one evening talking about nothing and everything. And then dinner again, this time just the two of them, at a quiet bistro where they stayed until the place closed. They talked about their lives, their mistakes, the things they wished they'd done differently. Adrienne told him about the pressure of corporate life, the years she'd spent chasing promotions she didn't really want, the loneliness of being good at something that didn't make her happy. Nolan told her about his wife, about the grief that had shaped him into someone cautious and small, about the fear that had kept him from taking risks for 6 years. And somewhere in the middle of all that talking, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a single moment. It was the way Adrienne laughed at his jokes, the way she asked about Mia without it feeling forced, the way she didn't try to fix him or change him or push him into being someone he wasn't. It was the way Nolan felt lighter when he was with her, like the weight he'd been carrying for years had room to breathe. One night, after dinner, they sat in Adrienne's car outside Nolan's house. The lights were on inside. Mia was home with a babysitter, and Nolan knew he should go in. But he didn't move. "What are you thinking?" Adrienne asked. Nolan looked at her. "I'm thinking this is the first time in 6 years I've felt like maybe I could do this." "Do what?" "Let someone in." Adrienne's expression softened. "You're already letting me in." "I know, and it scares the hell out of me." "Why?" Because the last time I let someone in, I lost her, and I don't know if I can survive that again. Adrienne reached over and took his hand. "You're not going to lose me, Nolan. You don't know that." "No, I don't. But I do know that shutting people out doesn't keep you safe. It just keeps you lonely." She squeezed his hand. "And I don't want you to be lonely." Nolan's chest ached. "What if I screw this up? Then we'll figure it out. Together." Adrienne smiled. "I'm not going anywhere unless you want me to." "I don't." "Then stop overthinking it." Nolan laughed, short and rough. "Mia said you'd say that." "Your daughter's very wise." "Yeah, she is." Adrienne leaned over and kissed him then, soft and tentative, giving him room to pull away if he wanted. But Nolan didn't pull away. He kissed her back, his hand coming up to cup her face, and for the first time in years, he let himself believe that maybe this could work. When they pulled apart, Adrienne was smiling. "So, we're doing this?" "Yeah, we're doing this." "Good." She kissed him again, quick and sweet. "Now go inside before Mia sends out a search party." Nolan laughed and got out of the car. He stood on the sidewalk and watched Adrienne drive away, feeling like he'd just stepped off a cliff and found solid ground on the other side. But solid ground didn't last. 3 days later, Nolan got a call from Agent Kwan. "Mr. Pierce, we have a problem." Nolan was at his desk, working on a client report. He set down his pen. "What kind of problem?" "Victor Hale's lawyer is claiming the financial evidence was obtained illegally. He's filed a motion to suppress everything you compiled." Nolan's stomach dropped. "On what grounds?" "He's saying you didn't have authorization to access the company's internal records, that you were acting as a private investigator without a license, and that anything you found is inadmissible." "That's insane. Adrienne gave me access to her files." "Adrienne Vale doesn't have the authority to grant access to company-wide financial records. The board does. And Victor's lawyer is arguing that you bypassed proper channels." Kwan's voice was tight. "If the judge agrees, we lose the case. All of it." Nolan stood, pacing. "What do you need from me?" "Testimony. We need you to testify that Adrienne requested your help, that you acted in good faith, and that you didn't knowingly violate any laws." "When?" "The hearing's in 2 days." Nolan stopped pacing. 2 days? "Victor's lawyer is pushing for a fast resolution. If we don't counter this now, he walks." "Okay, I'll be there." "Thank you. I'll send you the details." Kwan paused. "Mr. Pierce, I need you to be prepared. Victor's lawyer is going to come after you hard. He's going to paint you as an opportunist who overstepped, who manipulated Ms. Vale into giving you access she didn't have the authority to grant. He's going to try to discredit you." "Let him try. I'm serious." This could get ugly. I don't care. I'm not letting Victor Hale walk because his lawyer found a technicality. Kwan's voice softened. I was hoping you'd say that. I'll see you in 2 days. She hung up. Nolan stood there staring at the phone, his mind already racing through what was coming. Then he called Adrienne. She answered on the first ring. Hey? What's up? We have a problem. Bad. They met at a coffee shop an hour later. Adrienne looked worried, her hands wrapped around a cup she wasn't drinking. Victor's lawyer is going after you, she said. Yeah, he's claiming I didn't have legal authorization to access your files, that I acted outside the law. But I gave you access. You don't have the authority to do that, not legally. The board does. Adrienne's face went pale. So if the judge agrees with him, the evidence gets thrown out. Victor walks. Ethan, Laura, Marcus, all of them. The whole case falls apart. No. Adrienne shook her head. No, that's not happening. I'll testify. I'll tell them I asked you to help, that I gave you everything willingly. It won't be enough. Victor's lawyer is going to argue that you didn't understand the legal implications of what you were doing, that I took advantage of your desperation. That's a lie. I know, but it's a good lie. And if the judge buys it, we're done. Adrienne set her cup down hard. Then what do we do? I testify. I explain exactly what happened, why I did it, and let the judge decide. And if the judge decides against you? Nolan met her eyes. Then at least I tried. Adrienne stared at him, her throat working. This is my fault. I dragged you into this. If you get in trouble because of me, stop. This isn't your fault. Victor Hale committed fraud. His lawyer is trying to get him off on a technicality. That's on them, not you. But you could lose your license. You could get sued. I know the risks, and I'm taking them anyway. Nolan reached across the table and took her hand. I'm not walking away from this. Not now. Adrienne's eyes filled with tears. Why? Why are you doing this? Because it's the right thing to do. And because I care about you. She squeezed his hand, her grip almost painful. I care about you too. Then trust me. Let me handle this. Adrienne nodded, wiping her eyes. Okay, but I'm coming to the hearing. You don't have to. I'm coming. If you're going to stand up there and fight for me, the least I can do is be there to watch. Nolan smiled. Okay. To main it. The hearing was held in a federal courthouse downtown, in a wood-paneled room that smelled like old books and tension. Nolan sat at a table with Agent Kwan and a federal prosecutor named Dennis Cho. Across the aisle, Victor Hale sat with his lawyer, a sharp-eyed man in an expensive suit who looked like he'd been born arguing. Adrienne sat in the gallery, her hands folded in her lap, her face pale. The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair, called the hearing to order. We're here to address the defense's motion to suppress evidence obtained by Mr. Nolan Pierce. Counselor, you may proceed. Victor's lawyer stood. His name was Gerald Marks, and he moved like a predator. Your Honor, the defense moves to suppress all evidence compiled by Mr. Pierce on the grounds that it was obtained illegally. Mr. Pierce is not a licensed investigator. He had no legal authority to access my client's company records. And Ms. Vale, who granted him access, did not have the board's authorization to do so. This is a clear violation of corporate privacy laws, and any evidence obtained through this violation should be inadmissible. Cho stood. Your Honor, Mr. Pierce was acting as a consultant at Ms. Vale's request. He did not break into the company's systems. He did not hack or steal anything. He reviewed documents that Ms. Vale provided to him in good faith, and he found evidence of a massive criminal operation. The defense is trying to exploit a technicality to protect a guilty man. It's not a technicality, Marks shot back. It's the law. And if Mr. Pierce is allowed to bypass legal protocols simply because he was helping a friend, then we might as well throw out every rule designed to protect corporate privacy. The judge looked at Nolan. Mr. Pierce, did you have authorization from the company's board to access these records? Nolan stood. No, Your Honor, I didn't. Did you know at the time that you were accessing documents you had no legal right to see? I knew that Ms. Vale didn't have full authority to grant me access, But I also knew that she was being framed for a crime she didn't commit, and that she had less than 8 hours to prove her innocence. I made a judgment call. A judgment call that violated the law, Mark said. A judgment call that exposed a $43 million fraud operation, Cho countered. The judge held up a hand. Enough. Mr. Pierce, I'm going to ask you directly. Did you believe at the time that you were acting legally? Nolan thought about that night in the hotel, about Adrienne sitting on the floor surrounded by papers, about the desperation in her voice when she asked for help. No, Your Honor, he said. I didn't think about the legality. I thought about what was right. The courtroom went silent. Mark smiled. Your Honor, you just heard the witness admit. I'm not finished, Nolan said, his voice cutting through. You want to talk about the law? Fine. The law says I shouldn't have looked at those files without board authorization. But the law also says that corporations can't steal $43 million, launder it through offshore accounts, and frame an innocent employee to cover their tracks. And when I walked into that hotel room and saw what was happening, I had a choice. I could follow the rules and let an innocent woman take the fall for a crime she didn't commit, or I could help her find the truth. I chose the truth. And if that means I broke a rule, then I'll accept the consequences. But don't stand there and tell me that protecting a criminal is more important than exposing one. The judge studied him for a long moment. Then she looked at Marks. Counselor, your client is accused of orchestrating a massive fraud operation. The evidence compiled by Mr. Pierce is the only reason this case exists. Are you seriously asking me to throw it out because he didn't fill out the right forms? I'm asking you to uphold the law, Your Honor. The law is not a shield for criminals. Motion denied. She banged her gavel. The evidence stands. We'll proceed to trial. Marks's face went red. Your Honor. That's my ruling, Counselor. If you don't like it, file an appeal. The judge stood. We're adjourned. Nolan sat down, his heart pounding. Across the aisle, Victor Hale was staring at him with pure hatred. Adrienne was already out of her seat, moving toward him. When she reached the table, she threw her arms around him, her voice shaking. You did it. We did it. No, you did. She pulled back, her eyes wet. Thank you. Quan came over, smiling. Nice speech. Nolan laughed, shaky. I wasn't sure it would work. Well, it did. The case is moving forward. Victor's going to trial, and with the evidence you compiled, he's going to lose. Good. Quan shook his hand. We'll be in touch, but for now, you're done. Go home. Celebrate. Nolan nodded, and Quan walked away. Adrienne stayed close, her hand in his. Come on, she said, let's get out of here. They walked out of this courthouse together into the bright afternoon sun. The city was alive around them, people rushing, cars honking, life moving forward. And for the first time in days, Nolan felt like he could breathe. Adrienne stopped on the courthouse steps and turned to him. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to. Yes, I do. You risked everything for me. Your reputation, your career, I didn't risk everything. I risked breaking a rule to do the right thing. That's not the same. Adrienne smiled, tears streaming down her face. You're the best person I've ever met. I'm really not. You are. She kissed him then, right there on the courthouse steps, in front of everyone. And Nolan kissed her back, feeling like he'd finally found something worth fighting for. When they pulled apart, Adrienne was grinning. So, what now? Now we wait for the trial, and we see this thing through to the end. Together? Together. Adrienne took his hand and they walked down the steps into the rest of their lives. The trial took 3 months to reach a verdict. 3 months of depositions and witness testimony, of Nolan sitting in courtrooms watching lawyers tear apart the case he'd built, of Adrienne on the stand explaining how she'd been used and manipulated by people she'd trusted. 3 months of waiting, of second-guessing, of wondering if the evidence would be enough. But in the end, it was. Victor Hale was convicted on 14 counts of fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. Ethan Carr got 12 years. Laura Wynn got 8. Marcus Lynn took a plea deal and got 5 with the possibility of parole. The judge ordered full restitution to the company, seizure of all offshore accounts, and penalties that would bankrupt everyone involved. When the verdict came down, Adrienne was sitting in the gallery beside Nolan, her hand gripping his so tightly his fingers went numb. She didn't cry. She didn't celebrate. She just exhaled, long and slow, like she'd been holding her breath for months and could finally let it go. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed them. Adrienne gave a brief statement, professional, composed, thanking the FBI and the prosecution and saying she was ready to move forward. She didn't mention Nolan, and he was grateful for that. He'd done enough. He didn't need his name in the papers. When they finally escaped to Adrienne's car, she sat in the driver's seat for a long time, staring at the steering wheel. "You okay?" Nolan asked. "I don't know." She turned to him, her eyes bright. "I thought I'd feel different. Relieved, maybe. Or vindicated. But I just feel tired." "That's normal, is it?" "Yeah, you've been fighting for months. Now that it's over, your body doesn't know what to do." Adrienne laughed, brittle. "My body wants to sleep for a week." "Then sleep. You've earned it." She looked at him, her expression softening. "What about you? How do you feel?" Nolan thought about that. "I feel like I did the right thing, and that's enough." "Just enough?" "Yeah," he smiled. "I'm not built for big victories. I'm built for small ones. Getting Mia to school on time, finishing a case, helping someone who needs it. This," he gestured at the courthouse, "this is bigger than anything I've ever done. But at the end of the day, it's just another case. Another problem solved." "You're selling yourself short." "Maybe, but I'm okay with that." Adrienne shook her head, smiling. "You're impossible." "I've been told." She leaned over and kissed him, soft and slow. When she pulled back, she was still smiling. "Come home with me. Let's have a drink and not talk about fraud for once." "I'd like that." They drove to Adrienne's house, and for the first time in months, they didn't talk about the case. They talked about Mia's upcoming soccer tournament, about the trip Adrienne was planning to the coast, about the book Nolan was reading and the recipe Adrienne wanted to try. Normal things. Safe things. The kind of conversation that felt like putting down a weight you'd been carrying for too long. When they got to her house, Adrienne poured 2 glasses of wine and they sat on the couch, the evening light slanting through the windows. Nolan felt the tension in his shoulders ease for the first time in weeks. "I've been thinking," Adrienne said after a while. "About what?" "About what comes next." She swirled her wine, not looking at him. "The board offered me my old job back, with a promotion, senior VP of finance." Nolan set his glass down. "That's great." "I turned it down." He looked at her, surprised. "Why?" "Because I don't want to go back to that world. I spent 10 years climbing that ladder, and for what? So I could get framed by the people I worked for. So I could spend 80 hours a week in meetings that didn't matter?" She shook her head. "I don't want that anymore." "What do you want?" Adrienne was quiet for a long time. "I want to do something that matters. I want to wake up in the morning and feel like I'm making a difference, not just making money." "That's a big shift." "I know, and I don't have it all figured out yet. But I've been talking to some people about starting a nonprofit. Something that helps small businesses with financial literacy, fraud prevention, that kind of thing. Using what I know to help people who can't afford the kind of legal protection big companies have." Nolan felt something warm settle in his chest. "That sounds perfect for you." "You think so?" "Yeah, I do." Adrienne smiled, fragile and hopeful. "I'm terrified." "That's how you know it's the right thing. Is that what you tell yourself when you're scared?" "Every time." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "What about you? What comes next for Nolan Pierce, forensic accountant and reluctant hero?" Nolan laughed. "I'm not a hero. You saved my life." "I helped you save your own life. There's a difference." "Always so modest." Adrienne sat up, looking at him seriously. "But really, what do you want?" Nolan thought about that. For 6 years, all he'd wanted was stability, safety, a life where nothing hurt and nothing changed. But somewhere in the last few months, that had shifted. He'd let Adrienne in, he'd taken risks, he'd stepped outside the careful boundaries he'd built, and he hadn't fallen apart. "I want what I have," he said finally. "My daughter, my work, you." "Me?" "Yeah." He met her eyes. "If you'll have me." Adrienne's throat worked. "Nolan, I know it's complicated. I know you're figuring out your life, and I've got Mia to think about, but I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose you." You're not going to lose me. She reached over and took his hand. I'm not going anywhere. You say that now. But what happens when you start your nonprofit and you're traveling and meeting new people and building something amazing? What happens when your life gets bigger and mine stays small? Your life isn't small, Nolan. You have a daughter who adores you. You do work that matters. You help people. That's not small, that's real. She squeezed his hand. And I don't want a bigger life if you're not in it. Nolan felt his chest tighten. You mean that? Yeah, I do. He kissed her then, and it felt like a promise, like the beginning of something he'd been too scared to hope for. When they pulled apart, Adrian was smiling. So, we're really doing this? Yeah, we are. Good. She curled up against him, her head on his chest. Because I'm kind of in love with you. Nolan's breath caught. Yeah? Yeah. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. I'm kind of in love with you, too. They sat like that for a long time, the room growing dark around them, the city quiet outside. And for the first time in years, Nolan felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. 2 weeks later, Adrienne met Mia for coffee. Nolan had offered to come, but Adrienne said no. She wanted to talk to Mia alone, woman to woman, without Nolan hovering in the background trying to manage the conversation. Mia agreed, but not without interrogating her dad first. What does she want to talk about? Mia asked the night before. I don't know. She just said she wanted to spend some time with you. Is this like a getting to know you thing, or I'm dating your dad and need your approval thing? Nolan smiled. Probably both. Okay, but if she's weird, I'm telling you. She won't be weird. You don't know that. Fair enough. The next day, Adrian picked Mia up from school and took her to a coffee shop downtown. Mia ordered a hot chocolate with extra whipped cream and sat across from Adrian in a booth by the window, looking suspicious. So, Mia said, what's this about? Adrian smiled. I wanted to talk to you. Just us. About what? About your dad. And me. And what this all means. Mia stirred her hot chocolate, not looking up. You're dating him. Yeah, I am. And you want to know if I'm okay with it. I want to know what you think. Honestly. Mia was quiet for a moment, and Adrienne waited. She'd learned over the last few months that Mia was sharp and deliberate, that she didn't say things she didn't mean. I think my dad's been sad for a long time, Mia said, finally. Since my mom died. He tries to hide it, but I can tell. He's always worried about me, always trying to make everything perfect. Like if he messes up, I'll fall apart or something, and it's exhausting. Adrienne's chest ached. I'm sure he just wants to protect you. I know, but I don't need him to protect me from everything. I need him to be happy. Mia looked up, her eyes serious. And you make him happy. I can see it. He smiles more when he talks about you. He's less worried. He's lighter. That means a lot to me. Good. Because if you hurt him, I'll be really mad. Adrienne laughed despite herself. Fair enough. I'm serious. He's a good person, and he deserves someone who's going to stick around. I'm not going anywhere, Mia. I promise. Mia studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded. Okay, I believe you. Thank you. But just so you know, if you and my dad get married, I'm not calling you Mom. Adrienne smiled. I wouldn't ask you to. Good. Mia took a sip of her hot chocolate, leaving a whipped cream mustache. So, do you like soccer? I've never really watched it. Well, you're going to because my tournament's next weekend and Dad said you're coming. He did? Yeah, he's terrible at keeping secrets. Mia grinned. But don't worry, I'll explain the rules to you. Adrienne laughed, and for the first time she felt like maybe she could do this. Maybe she could be part of this family, this life, this small and fragile world that Nolan had built. The soccer tournament was chaos. 12-year-olds running in every direction, parents yelling from the sidelines, coaches blowing whistles, kids crying over skinned knees and missed goals. Nolan stood on the sidelines with a clipboard, looking frazzled, while Adrienne sat in a folding chair with a thermos of coffee, watching it all unfold. Mia's team lost the first game and won the second. By the third game, it was pouring rain, and half the kids were covered in mud. Mia scored a goal in the final 5 minutes, and Nolan cheered so loud Adrienne thought he might lose his voice. When the game ended, Mia ran over, muddy and grinning. "Did you see that?" "I saw it," Adrian said. "You were amazing." "I know." Mia grabbed a water bottle and chugged it. "Thanks for coming." "Of course." Nolan jogged over, his hair soaked, his jacket splattered with mud. "Good game, kiddo." "Thanks, Dad." Mia looked between them, her grin widening. "You guys are cute together." "Mia," Nolan started, but she was already running off to join her teammates. Adrienne laughed. "She's not wrong. She's 12. She doesn't know anything." "She knows enough." Adrian stood and kissed him, mud and all. "Come on, let's get out of the rain." They drove home through the downpour, Mia in the back seat singing along to the radio, Nolan and Adrienne holding hands in the front. And Adrienne thought that this messy, chaotic, imperfect life was exactly what she'd been missing. 3 months after the trial ended, Adrienne officially launched her nonprofit. It was called Safeguard, and its mission was simple: to provide free financial literacy and fraud prevention resources to small businesses and individuals who couldn't afford corporate protections. Adrienne rented a small office downtown, hired 2 staff members, and started reaching out to community organizations. The work was hard, harder than anything she'd done in corporate finance, but it was also fulfilling in a way her old job had never been. Nolan helped when he could, reviewing case files, offering forensic advice, teaching workshops on how to spot financial red flags. And slowly, Safeguard started to grow. One afternoon, Adrienne came home to find Nolan and Mia in the kitchen, making dinner. Mia was chopping vegetables with the concentration of a surgeon, and Nolan was at the stove, stirring something that smelled amazing. "Hey," Adrienne said, dropping her bag by the door. "Hey." Nolan looked over his shoulder, smiling. "How was your day?" "Good. We got our first major donation, $10,000 from a local business owner who said we helped him avoid a fraud scheme." "That's incredible." "Yeah, it is." Adrienne walked over and wrapped her arms around him from behind. "Thank you." "For what?" "For believing in me. For helping me build this." Nolan turned and kissed her. "You built it. I just showed up." "You always show up." She looked at Mia. "Both of you." Mia grinned. "We're a team." "Yeah," Adrienne smiled. "We are." Odd. 6 months later, Nolan woke up to the sound of rain on the windows and Adrienne's arm draped across his chest. They'd spent the night at his place, something that had become more and more common as the months went on. He lay there for a while, listening to her breathe, thinking about how much his life had changed in less than a year. He'd met a stranger in a hotel during a storm. He'd helped her prove her innocence. He'd testified in federal court, risked his career, and watched a conspiracy unravel. And somewhere in the middle of all that chaos, he'd fallen in love. It wasn't the love he'd had with his wife. That had been young and easy, built on shared dreams and the belief that nothing bad could ever happen. This love was different. It was scarred and cautious, built on the understanding that bad things did happen, that people got hurt, that life didn't promise happy endings. But it was real. And it was his. Adrienne stirred beside him, opening her eyes. "What time is it?" "Early. Go back to sleep." "Can't. I've got a meeting at 9. She sat up, running a hand through her hair. "What are you thinking about?" "You." She smiled. "Good things, I hope." "Yeah, good things." Adrienne leaned over and kissed him. "I love you." "I love you too." She got up and headed for the shower, and Nolan lay there for a few more minutes, feeling the weight of those words settle into his chest. Later, over breakfast, Mia asked Adrienne if she was coming to her next soccer game. "Of course," Adrienne said. "I wouldn't miss it." "Good. Because we're playing the team that beat us last time, and I want revenge." Nolan laughed. "It's not about revenge, Mia. It's about having fun." "It's about both." Mia grinned at Adrienne. "Right?" "Right," Adrienne winked. "I'll bring the coffee." That night, after Mia went to bed, Nolan and Adrienne sat on the porch, watching the rain. It wasn't the violent storm from that first night, just a steady drizzle, the kind that made everything feel quiet and still. "I've been thinking," Adrienne said. "About what?" "About moving in together." Nolan looked at her, surprised. "Here? Or my place? Or somewhere new?" "I don't know." She turned to him. But I'm tired of going back and forth. I want to wake up with you every morning. I want to be part of your life, really part of it. What about Mia? I already talked to her. She's okay with it. More than okay, actually. She said it's about time. Nolan laughed. Of course she did. So? Adrian took his hand. What do you think? Nolan thought about the life he'd built over the last 6 years. Small and safe and closed off. He thought about the night he'd met Adrian, about the risk he'd taken by helping her, about the way his world had cracked open and let something new in. And he thought about what Mia had said months ago in the car. You deserve to be happy, Dad. Yeah, he said. Let's do it. Adrian's face lit up. Really? Really? She kissed him, and it felt like a beginning. A year after the storm, Nolan and Adrian stood in the same hotel where they'd first met. The Clearwater Grand had invited them to a charity event benefiting Safeguard, and Adrian had insisted they go. It feels right, she'd said, coming full circle. They stood in the lobby, surrounded by well-dressed donors and community leaders, and Nolan thought about that night, about the chaos and the fear and the stranger who'd offered to share her room because she had no other choice. Adrian squeezed his hand. What are you thinking? I'm thinking about how lucky I am. Lucky? Yeah, I could have said no that night. I could have slept on a conference room floor and driven home the next day and never seen you again. But you didn't. No, I didn't. Nolan looked at her. And my whole life changed because of it. Adrian's eyes filled with tears. Mine too. They stood there for a moment, the noise of the event fading into the background. Then Adrian smiled. Come on, let's go make a speech and raise some money. You make the speech. I'll stand in the back and look supportive. Deal. Later that night, after the event ended and they drove home, Adrian asked Nolan if he had any regrets. About what? He asked. About helping me. About getting involved. About everything that came after. Nolan thought about the months of testimony, the sleepless nights, the fear that he'd made the wrong call. He thought about the risks he'd taken, the rules he'd broken, the careful life he'd disrupted. And then he thought about Adrienne, sitting beside him in the car, about Mia, asleep in her room, safe and loved, about the life they were building together, messy and imperfect and real. No, he said, no regrets. Adrienne smiled. Good, because I don't have any either. They drove the rest of the way in comfortable silence, the city lights flickering past. And when they got home, Nolan checked on Mia, then climbed into bed beside Adrian and held her close. Because that's what love was, he thought. Not the absence of fear or risk or pain, but the willingness to face all of it together and choose each other anyway. And in the end, that was the only thing that mattered. The storm had passed, the chaos had settled. And what remained was something worth keeping, something fragile and strong and entirely their own. A life built not on what they'd lost, but on what they'd found in the middle of the wreckage, each other. And the courage to believe that sometimes the greatest risk is not in letting someone in, but in keeping them out.